2, 1, 2, check. Hey, welcome back to the Confidad Podcast. My name's Tinquist. Glad to have you here with us today. We'll begin this episode like we do every single one with our fatherhood mindset. Let's say it out loud together. I am the only one who can fulfill the father role I have, so I choose to do it well. I get to show up well for my kids. Imperfection is reality. Ownership is a choice. Today is brand new, so is tomorrow. I am wholly loved, so I will love wholly. Today in our equipping section, we're going to talk about the rule of life number 2, the second one, and this is all about trust. Understanding that trust is earned. Like as adults towards our kids, we earn their trust. Obviously, like automatically they trust us when they're young, but many times we do things that breaks that trust. And so it's kind of this continual work to move towards them in a way that says, you can trust me, you can trust me, you can trust me. And I have a very specific example today of something that is pretty common that I think is a common way that we break trust very easily and unintentionally with our kids. The reality is that what you say and how you talk about your kids around others, whether it's adults or their friends, it will communicate volumes to your kids about whether or not they can trust you. Creating this safe haven at home, like this home becoming the safest place where your kids can ask any question on any topic, is a fantastic goal, and I think should be the place where your kids come to ask any question or talk about any topic. Whether or not we have the answers, whether or not we're equipped to answer their questions, it ought to be the place that they're able to come with those questions so that we can say, hey, here's what I think, here's the answers. Or if we don't know the answers, we're able to say, I don't know. Let's find out together, right? Some of the most powerful words we can say to our kids is that phrase right there. Have you ever said to your kid, I don't know, but let's find out? What it does is communicates honesty, humility, and curiosity. 3 valuable things within a relationship that say, hey, I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to put on some good face and be like, yeah, I know everything. I'm perfect. No, I don't know. But I care enough to help you find the answer if you care enough to come ask me this question. You care to explore this topic with me. And so often parents will just be like, no, that's wrong. Or no, I don't know. Or they'll make up an answer. And then what that does is either creates a false sense of security within the child because they're like, oh, my dad said it or my mom said it, and that means it's truth. And if we're speaking out of either like lack of sincerity or we don't know and we're battling our own insecurities with not being able to say, I don't know, what that does is it just builds on a really shaky foundation where it's not actually built on like truth, right? Saying I don't know can be a true statement. Saying let's find out together can be the way to finding the truth and continuing to build this relationship on truth, not on false statements. And so that's a really helpful thing for us to understand, that like saying I don't know to our kids can be a great kind of gateway into discovery and deepening our relationship as we explore whatever topic they are curious about together. Here's the other thing that happens. Kids can bring things up to us, and we as adults who have this perspective and this ability to see things for how they quote unquote really are, we can often dismiss our kids' fears or concerns or worries because, oh, they're just childish, right? Like, don't worry about that. You don't have to worry about that. You're not an adult. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But if your kid is really feeling that emotion, you don't have to necessarily validate the position when you validate the emotion. Let me talk about that for a minute. Like, if your kid is feeling fear, their brain can't tell the difference between like getting chased by a bear and being afraid of some shadow in the dark, right? Like their brain is going to process the chemical that is presented when fear is presented the same way. And so as we as adults, we need to validate the reality, like validate the fear, the emotion, whatever is going through them, at the same time as kind of steering them in the direction to be like, hey, our emotions don't get to drive the bus, right? Like we get to talk about these things. So it's kind of a nuanced space where we are able to both validate their emotions, but then also make sure that we are continuing to move them in the direction of thinking, talking through whatever kind of things they're feeling. Obviously, isn't like immediate. Sometimes those things take time, But instead of just dismissing their fears and being like, no, don't be afraid of that, or don't worry about that. You don't have to worry. Like, what that tells them is we are not a safe place. We cannot be trusted with those big emotions. And so then either they will bottle them up, or they will take them somewhere else, or they'll start to find an inappropriate way to express them that will then become very frustrating for us, because we're like, why are you behaving like this? And it's like, well, probably partly because we dismiss their big feelings or fears or emotions, whatever they have going on. Okay. To a degree, it doesn't matter whether they're with us or not when we are dismissing these fears, right? So say you want to go to a friend and you're venting and you're like, oh, I can't believe it's just so hard when my kid does X, Y, Z. But we have to be very careful about the words that we speak about our kids, whether they're present or not, because if we're breaking confidence, that's just lack of integrity, right? And we want to make sure that whatever kind of perspective or attitude we have towards our kids, we want it to be consistent with them present, with them not in the room, okay? I'm not saying you can't vent to people or be frustrated about your kids and find ways to healthily move through that space, but we have to be so careful that we're not just dismissing their concerns or dismissing their emotions, because that can lead to a lack of like desire to help them grow, because we can just be like, oh, why do they struggle with this? Do we want to help them grow? Do we want to help them move through this? Or do we want to just wait until it, quote unquote, blows over? Which doesn't really work that way. And so let me explain this with an example that's helpful. So growing up in a family that was filled with storytellers, it was really interesting to hear the stories being told around the dinner table or in the living room and that sort of thing. And I remember very distinctly certain moments where stories were being told about me that were very, very embarrassing to me. And the reason they were being told was because the story was so hilarious. It was so funny and everyone got a great laugh out of it. And I think that's a pretty common thing in many families. And you know, a lot of people say it's no big deal. But my concern or my pushback would be, what is it communicating to the child about whether or not you can be trusted? If you think of a story of your child and it's just a hilarious one, right? Like everyone's going to bust a gut over it, but you share that story without your child's permission and your child catches ear, like they understand, they find out that you're telling this story, or they're in the room or in the next room over and they hear you telling this story and you haven't checked with them. You haven't asked them if this is okay. Do you know how it affects them? Like, have you ever asked them, hey, do you remember that time that this happened? Are you okay if I tell that story? Or how do you feel when I tell that story? If you've never asked that, it's a really important, lesson to start to learn about our kids. So this is a pretty nuanced thing, because like one of our boys, he loves when we tell stories about him, and he doesn't honestly really care, for the most part, which stories we tell. He will laugh right along with us. But some of the other stories with some of the other boys, they're much more sensitive about. And so we need to open up our eyes and ears to think about, how I'm telling this story affect my child? Because we might be like, it's no big deal. Like, I'm not trying to hurt him. I'm just making conversation. And it's a hilarious story. Have you seen how people laugh when we tell this story? My question is, like, what matters more? The laughs that you get and the ability to tell the story, or generating and maintaining a safe space where your kids are safe to dream, fail, learn, and grow with you through their stories, through their experience, through the things that they're trying and failing at? Is that what's true in your house? Like I said, this is a super nuanced space, and you will likely fail many times when learning. I still struggle to this day to make sure I'm not telling stories that aren't mine to tell. And we established this rule when our 12-year-old was entering preschool, 7 years ago, right? It's not to say that you'll ever hit this perfectly. Can you move to 80%? 80% of the time you're doing that, maybe even better. And then when you do fail, you're learning to apologize and repair within that relationship. Because it is, sometimes you get caught up and you start telling a story and it's hilarious. And then it's not until you finish the story and you see the laughs and you see the look on your kid's face that you go, shoot, that's right. I wasn't supposed to share that one. And so the key is not to just be, all down on yourself and feel bad. The key is to learn and adapt, to stay disciplined. And when your kids say something like, that hurts when you talk about me like that, you take it in. There's too much at stake not to apply this in our lives, apply this in our own families, and establish the second rule of life, that becoming a trustworthy place for your kids means sacrificing some things that you may think are just mundane, whatever, ordinary, no big deal. But if you don't start to learn and understand what things affect your kids in what ways, then it's going to be really hard to maintain a level of trust. The key is this rule of life of being a trustworthy place. It is earned, it's invaluable, and the need to maintain it is so high that learning how to do this within your own family culture is extremely, extremely important. Like I said, some kids won't care as much. Some others are much more sensitive. And so we have to use our ears, our eyes, and our heart to discern this for each child. And the goal here isn't to just like toe the line, like how close can I get before I lose their trust? The goal is to ensure that we are the safest people for our kids to process life with. And even if we don't have the answers, if we can't, we don't have it all together ourselves, like even though that is true, our kids trust us to help them find that person who does have the answers, and they're willing to sit and wait with us because we're willing to be patient and sit with them, waiting for the answers in the midst of the unknown, whatever is going on in their lives. So growing up is scary, lots of questions, lots of misunderstandings, lots of assumptions being made. And are we willing to be the people that hold that space with our kids and create a trustworthy space, a place where they go, I trust my mom and dad. Yeah, they fail. Yeah, they struggle, but I know that they've got my back, and I know that they're listening when I talk to them. And I know that they're a safe place to dream, to fail, to learn, and to grow, because I've experienced it. I have dreamt with them and they've supported me. I have failed and they have supported me. I have learned from that failure and my parents have supported me, and I've grown from that failure through the learning, right? Because my parents support me all the way. This is probably one of the most impactful pieces that I share in the course that I've had my clients say, I've never thought about that before. And now before I open my mouth and I start sharing stories at the next family gathering or the next neighborhood gathering, I'm thinking twice about how is this going to affect my kids? And so the equipping section today is literally just think about the things that are coming out of our mouths when we're talking about our kids. Not only just the labels that we put on them and say, oh, they're a little whatever, dancer, boxer, soccer player, art kid, whatever, but also thinking about the stories that we're telling. Why are we telling these stories? And then understanding, how does it affect our kids? And so the homework here, the empowerment moment, is for you to go and process that, to think about, how do the words that come out of my mouth when I speak about my kid affect them day in, day out? Learn, adapt, establish this second rule of life, that trust is earned and it is invaluable. We'll see you in the next episode.